Bob hairstyles are seriously trending right now, but not every bob will work for you. So why don't you and I sit down and figure out exactly which bob is going to work best for you. I'm going to break down 5 bob hairstyles that are seriously blowing up right now. I'll let you know exactly what they are. Most importantly, which one would work great for you and which ones you should just, well, steer clear of. Okay, bob number 1 is the bubble bob. These names are ridiculous. So this is a shape that, well, has more roundness styled into the ends, which gives it a bit more of a rounded shape and therefore looks a bit like a bubble, hence the name. So it's a bit of a throwback to an 80s bob, and while it usually has a length that lands very close to the chin, it's kind of less defined by the length and more defined by the way it's styled. This is usually going to be styled with a huge round brush or just a larger round brush to get a lot of fullness and roundness to the shape with, again, that little bit of extra curl at the bottom that I mentioned earlier. So who's this for and basically who should steer clear of it? Well, due to the amount of volume and roundness coupled with the length landing at or close to the chin, anyone with a round face should know that this could add more roundness or fullness to their face. Also know that if you've got thick or full bangs, this is definitely going to enhance that illusion of that extra roundness in your face. With all that said, you could technically leave that length a little bit longer than the chin, which would definitely help to elongate your face a bit, but you might find it's actually harder to get the amount of bend in your hair to hold due to the extra length and heaviness that can come with that, and therefore you really wouldn't have the volume that this shape is kind of known for. With all that said, the big upside here is that you're not really married to a certain haircut. This is really based more on the overall style. So if you don't like it, you just restyle it and you have a different bob. So there you go, the bubble bob. All right, bob number 2 is the micro bob. The micro bob is definitely the shortest bob on this list, and it's kind of much more similar to a Bixie length. If you're unfamiliar with what a Bixie is, I created a whole video explaining them and what mistakes you need to be aware of if you're considering one. I'll go ahead and add a link in the description to that video so you can check it out if you want. The micro bob is all about getting that back length up close, or in some cases even a little above the neckline, and having the front length land very close to the cheekbone area. If you really want to take this to the next level, you could even add some bangs into the shape. This would give it a lot more of kind of an edgy feel. So who's this for and who should steer clear? Well, if you have thinner hair, this is actually a great option as the lengths are so short, it's easy to make them look thicker and therefore give your hair a denser overall feel. Now, this can also work great if you're really trying to accentuate cheekbones because the lengths are so short that they can easily get volume up around the temple area, and that's a great way to actually lift the eye and accentuate your cheekbones. If you have a higher neckline, this shape will work great, but if your neckline is a little bit lower, it may be harder to take that back length up short enough to really get the look without at least potentially shaving some of your neckline, which you may or may not want to do. This isn't a big deal, but it's definitely something that you should keep in mind. Speaking of necks, if you want to elongate your neck, this could be a good option since taking that length up shorter in the back will help to do that. However, if you're worried about your neck feeling too long, this could be a style that I would definitely stay away from because the higher you take that length, the longer your neck is going to look. Okay, if you know me and you've spent some time around this channel, the next bob on this list is definitely going to confuse you a bit, but it is nothing compared to the can of worms that I'm going to be opening a little later in the video when I share a little secret with you. So there's that. Bob number 3. Okay, bob number 3, the box bob. Wow, here we go. Okay, so if you've watched any of my videos, then you have likely seen me tell you that basically everything about a box bob is wrong. Like, it's just one big mistake. But this bob has also seen a massive surge in popularity, so I guess the question is, who's wrong? Me or the ridiculous amount of people that are Googling this style right now? Okay, so basically a box bob is a very geometric, blunt, one length bob. That's important. That means that the whole point of this is to have strong lines and no layering. The lack of layering is where I usually find a mistake and why I typically don't recommend them to clients. Don't get me wrong, they can look great, but if you're a person that's trying to accentuate your cheekbones or lift your face a bit, one length bobs just make that much harder to do. Not impossible, just harder, which is why I always talk about the benefits of layering. And we're going to talk more about who they're for and who they're not for in a sec. But basically, these are kind of a throwback to the origination of technical haircutting, which is kind of like the Vidal Sassoon bob. Now, the length usually sits somewhere between the collarbone and the chin, and honestly, they can be a really fashion-forward look. So who's this for and who should steer clear? Well, if you're a person that has very thick, heavy hair, especially with a bit of wave, this shape could definitely get very big on the sides and end up kind of looking a little bit more triangular shaped than you might want. Now, usually when I'm talking about hairstyles in my videos, I'm trying to help people find shapes that create volume in certain areas to help accentuate certain things about their face shape, something like cheekbone structure or lift their face, for instance. Now, if that's your focus as well, like I mentioned before, this shape could make that a bit harder for you to achieve. Now, if you've got medium to fine hair texture and density and want a very geometric style that can look super fashion forward and cool, this could definitely be your jam. Now, keep in mind, you can add some layering that's kind of hidden, which would help lighten the shape up a little bit, and it would still basically look one length. That's only gonna lighten it up so much, and if you overdo it, that could actually create more problems than any sort of benefit. Bob number 4, the 90s bob. The 90s bob is a throwback to days when bobs were a little bit less tailored and a little bit more kind of free with a lot of movement. And these are really the perfect shape for someone who wants a box bob but needs a few layers, or somebody that wants to try a layered bob but just kind of isn't ready to dive into full layering yet. Now, most of the time you're gonna find 90s bobs landing around the chin area, but you could also leave it a little bit longer as well. And to be honest, when you go online to look, you're probably gonna find people that refer to much shorter bobs as 90s bobs, which actually reaffirms that whole biggest mistake thing that I was talking about earlier when it comes to bobs. We'll talk more about that in just a second. Don't worry, we're gonna get to it. But the real separating factor with this bob is basically just the loose styling and a bit more movement and kind of an overall less styled feel. So who's this bob for and who should steer clear? Because of the standard length landing basically around the chin and the longer layers, if you have thick hair or any amount of wave or curl, this bob may get excess fullness around the cheeks and really could make your face look a bit fuller. If you have thin hair, this may be a great option since it has less layering and you can kind of focus that layering behind the ear, which would allow for a bit more volume but not make the sides look too thin. This bob is suited really well for hair that's medium density with a bit of bend or kind of texture, where you can just basically let it air dry and it would naturally get some movement and some shape. Bob number 5, the Italian bob. Okay, I'll stop. Basically because I'm probably horribly offending any of you that are Italian. I didn't say Italian, so feel good about that, I guess, right? Okay, so the Italian bob is very similar to most of the other bobs on this list in that it's mainly about movement. Now, you're gonna find people online saying that these have lengths everywhere from the chin down all the way to the collarbone. I think they really could be any length because it seems that what defines them is more the volume and bend than a fair amount of layers it's going to take to create them. I also noticed that most of the examples you're gonna find of this have a swept off bang that basically lands around the cheekbone. So who's this for and who should steer clear? This shape would be great if you want a shape with a ton of volume. And due to the fact that the length can range from the chin all the way down to the collarbone and there's a ton of layering involved, it really suits itself for any face shape because you can kind of work around the face shape with the layering. The only thing you may want to be aware of is that if you've got very thin hair, you may be able to get this overall feel, but it's likely going to require a lot of work to create it, and it might not last for very long once you have. And at the same time, if you've got stick straight hair that doesn't hold any sort of bend, this shape could also be a challenge for you. But at the same time, you could get a body perm, and if you're unfamiliar with what a body perm is, it's essentially a perm that's got a very, very loose amount of curl to it, and it's meant to actually be straight so that you just end up holding a little bit more of that bend that you're creating when you're blow drying it. Okay, and this leads me to the biggest mistake that you could make when choosing any of these bobs, or really any bobs for that matter. Oh my gosh, this is a secret that legitimately nobody's talking about, and I'm pretty sure that I'm about to share a very unpopular opinion that's probably gonna get me a lot of flack, but yeah, so here it goes. All of these bobs and their names are absolutely pointless. And if I'm honest, they're pretty dangerous for you as a client. Here we go. As a stylist, for me to create this video, I had to go research all of these different styles, see what's trending, and then find examples or photos of them. And in most cases, to find the photos, I had to search the name of the bob where I'd find some pics. Then to find more pics, I'd have to search other names for that same bob, like what it used to be called. So for instance, the box bob used to be called a one-length bob, and it's basically the same thing. So I searched box bob, found a few pics, and then I searched one length bob and found a bunch more. I also found a huge discrepancy in how different online articles described these different bobs, which is why it's so dangerous for you as a client. You find an article online, it talks about an Italian bob, you see the photos and you love it. You head to the stylist and you ask for the Italian bob. They cut what they consider to be the Italian bob and it looks nothing like what you expected. Now you hate your hair and you feel terrible about this whole experience. So to avoid the headache, just try this. Use these articles and this video to determine different styles that you like, regardless of their name. And then go and find photos of different bobs and shapes that you like and different bobs and shapes that you don't like. And then take all of that information into your style. And the two of you can explain what frustrates you with your hair, what you like about these different bobs, what you don't like about these different bobs. And you guys can come together to determine what the best overall shape would be for you, regardless of what the name is. I find this to be way safer than trying to throw out a name that could have completely different meanings to every different stylist that you tell it to. Now I'm gonna hear it in the comment. But nonetheless, if you liked this video and you wanna learn more about bobs, check out this video right here because I think you're gonna love it. And I will see you over there. Take care. Bye.